Life hasn't been kind to widowed rancher Cole Maddox. At 47, he's watching his Wyoming ranch slip away, haunted by debts and the grief of losing his wife. But when a mysterious fire claims the life of a rival landowner, Cole becomes the prime suspect. With no alibi and a history of disputes with the deceased, he faces a trial that could end with him behind bars. The small town has already convicted him in their minds. Then something extraordinary happens. During his arraignment, a young drifter named Lark Dawson bursts into the courtroom with an announcement that stuns everyone. She claims to be Cole's wife. It's a lie that will change both their lives forever. As Cole is released into her custody, a delicate dance begins between two strangers bound by a desperate deception. What could make a 19-year-old risk everything to save a man she's never met? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The ranch deed lay open on Cole Maddox's kitchen table, yellow with age, and worn at the creases where it had been folded and unfolded countless times. 4 generations of Maddox signatures graced that paper, starting with his great-grandfather's. Careful script. Now, like everything else in his life, it was threatening to slip through his fingers. Dawn painted the Wyoming sky in watercolor strokes of pink and gold as Cole stood at his kitchen window, coffee cup warming his weathered hands. Sarah had always loved this time of day. 3 years since her passing, and he still caught himself turning to share the sunrise with her empty chair. The morning carried a hint of autumn, just enough to make the horses nickering in their stalls visible in puffs of breath. Cole pulled his worn denim jacket closer, checking his reflection in the window. The mirror above the sink had been covered since Sarah's funeral, an old tradition she'd insisted on keeping from her Polish grandmother. Lately, he'd found himself grateful for it. The window's reflection was kinder, softening the grey at his temples and the deepening lines around his eyes. His morning routine hadn't changed in 20 years. Check the horses, mend what needed mending, try to stretch the feed a little further than it should go. The bank statements piled unopened by the door could wait another hour. Out here, with his boots crunching across frost-tipped grass, he could almost pretend everything was still the way it had been. "Morning, old girl," he murmured to Sarah's mare, Juniper, who whickered softly at his approach. The mare's coat was starting to show her age, but her eyes were still bright as she nudged his pockets for treats. "Sorry, June. Treats are a luxury. These days." The sound of an engine gunning too hard on the access road made both Cole and Juniper turn their heads. Frank Weber's new truck, all shiny paint and city polish, kicked up dust as it sped past the property line. The neighbor had been pushing hard to buy Cole out, making it clear that the Maddox Ranch was the only thing standing between him and his dreams of a luxury resort development. "Over my dead body," Cole muttered, an old rancher's oath that felt heavier these days. Weber's truck disappeared around the bend, but the dust lingered, settling on fence posts that needed mending and a barn that needed paint. Everything needed something, and the pile of bills by the door reminded him daily that he was running out of ways to provide it. The morning paper lay rolled up at the end of his driveway, and Cole took his time walking to get it. These days, it was mostly filled with stories about the changing face of Wyoming. Ranches being sold off, transformed into resorts, and vacation homes for people who'd never worked the land a day in their lives. He tucked it under his arm, without opening it. Some mornings, it was better not to know. Back in the kitchen, Sarah's favorite coffee mug still hung on its hook by the pot. The bright sunflower pattern faded from years of use. Cole touched it gently as he passed, a habit he couldn't break. The deed on the table seemed to watch him, its creased corners curling up like tired fingers. "I'm trying, Sarah," he whispered to the empty kitchen. "God knows I'm trying." The rest of his morning passed in the familiar rhythm of ranch work, his body moving through the motions while his mind churned over numbers that refused to add up. He'd sold off half the herd last spring, but it hadn't been enough. The drought had hit everyone hard, but without Sarah's veterinary income to fall back on, the ranch was bleeding out slowly. By noon, the autumn sun had burned away the morning. Chill, and Cole found himself back at the kitchen table, finally facing the stack of unopened mail. The deed watched him sort through bills and bank notices, its presence both a comfort and an accusation. 4 generations of Maddox ranchers had kept this land alive through worse than this, but none of them had faced it alone. The phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. Probably Weber again, with another offer that felt more like a threat. Cole let it ring, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeam that cut across his kitchen table, across the deed that tied him to this land as surely as any marriage vows. He didn't know it then, but it would be the last peaceful morning he'd have for a long time. By nightfall, everything would change, but for now, in the quiet of his kitchen, Cole Maddox was just another rancher trying to hold onto a way of life that the world seemed determined to leave behind. The sheriff's report would later describe the fire as suspicious in origin, spreading with unusual rapidity. But sitting in his darkened living room that night, Cole first noticed it as nothing more than a strange orange glow on the horizon, like a false dawn breaking in the wrong direction. He'd been up late again, a habit he'd developed since Sarah's passing. Sleep came easier in the chair than in their bed, though his back complained about it every morning. The television droned quietly, some late-night documentary about wild horses that Sarah would have loved. The empty whiskey glass on the side table caught the flickering light from outside, and for a moment Cole thought he was seeing reflections from the TV screen. But the glow grew brighter, angry and insistent against the star-filled Wyoming sky. Cole stood, joints creaking in protest, and moved to the window. The flame-lit clouds drew his eye to Weber's property, where fire was already consuming the main house with frightening intensity. "Dear God," he breathed, reaching for his phone. His fingers trembled as he dialed 911, eyes fixed on the inferno that seemed to be devouring the night itself. The dispatcher's voice sounded far away as he reported what he was seeing, his words tumbling out in a rush that didn't sound like his own voice. "Fire at the Weber property," he heard himself saying. It's bad, real bad." The next hours blurred together like watercolors in the rain. Fire trucks screamed past his property, their sirens cutting through the cricket song of the late summer night. Cole found himself moving without conscious thought, throwing on his boots, grabbing a jacket. His truck's engine roared to life, and he was halfway down his drive before he realized he was heading toward the blaze. Other vehicles were already parked along the access road, neighbors drawn by the commotion, their faces ghost-pale in the reflected firelight. Cole recognized most of them, had known some since childhood, but something in their expressions made him keep his distance. They watched him approach with strange, shuttered looks. The heat hit him first, a physical wall that drove him back several steps. Firefighters moved like shadows against the flames, their efforts seeming small against the fury of the blaze. Water streams arced through the smoke-thick air, disappearing into the inferno without visible effect. Sheriff Mills materialized from the chaos, his usually friendly face set in hard lines. "Cole," he said, and something in his tone made Cole's stomach clench. "Need you to step back from the scene, Tom. I came to help. Not tonight, you didn't." The sheriff's hand settled heavily on Cole's shoulder, steering him away from the gathering crowd. "Where were you around 10 o'clock this evening?" The question hit Cole like a physical blow. "I was home, watching TV. Tom, you can't seriously..." Lot of people heard about your argument with Frank yesterday, about the buyout offer." That was business, heated words, nothing more. But even as he spoke, Cole could feel the noose of circumstance tightening around his neck. The argument had been bad, worse than usual. Weber had threatened to bury him in litigation, to take the ranch piece by piece, through the courts, if Cole wouldn't sell willingly. The night air carried snippets of conversation from the gathering crowd. Always had it out for Frank, desperate. "At times, what a man might do to keep his land," Then a shout from the burning house changed everything. In the flickering light, Cole watched as firefighters emerged carrying something, someone. The night dissolved into a cascade of urgent voices, running feet, the wail of an ambulance that everyone already knew would arrive too late. Frank Weber, the man who'd wanted to turn century-old ranchland into a luxury resort, was carried out of his burning home. The man who'd threatened to destroy Cole's way of life was now beyond any earthly threats himself. Sheriff Mills' radio crackled with confirmation, what everyone already knew. His face, when he turned back to Cole, had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "Cole Maddox," he said, and the formal tone made Cole's blood run cold. "I'm going to need you to come down to the station with me." As the sheriff led him to the patrol car, Cole caught his reflection in the window. Smoke had smudged his face, turned his hair gray with ash. Behind him, the fire painted the sky in shades of hell, and he could feel the weight of his neighbor's stares like stones on his back. The ranch deed on his kitchen table flashed through his mind. 4 generations of honest work and proud heritage. Now, like Weber's house, it all seemed to be going up in smoke. The patrol car's door closed behind him with a sound like a coffin lid falling shut, and Cole watched his world disappear into the rearview mirror, obscured by flames and smoke and the growing certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The arrest warrant read like a stranger's life. Cole James Maddox, residing at 1442 Old Mill Road, Sundance, Wyoming. Charges of first-degree arson and criminal homicide stared up at him in stark black typeface, transforming 47 years of honest living into a set of accusations that felt like fiction. The holding cell at the sheriff's station smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Cole sat on the hard bench, his calloused hands hanging limply between his knees. The events of the past 12 hours had taken on a dreamlike quality, but the cold metal handcuffs had left very real bruises around his wrists. "Need to ask you again about that phone call, Cole." Sheriff Mills stood outside the cell, his notebook open. He looked uncomfortable in his formal uniform, worn for the morning's press conference. "You said Weber called you yesterday afternoon?" 4:30, thereabouts." Cole's voice sounded hollow in the concrete room. "Said he had one final offer for the ranch. Threatened to drown me in lawsuits if I didn't take it." "And that made you angry?" "Course it made me angry, Tom. Known each. The 30 years, and you're really asking me that?" The sheriff's pen scratched across paper. Outside the small window of the holding cell, Cole could hear the growing murmur of voices. The morning edition of the Sundance Gazette had already run the story. Local rancher questioned in rival's death. By noon, his face would be on every screen in 3 counties. "Your financials tell a pretty clear story," Mills continued, not meeting Cole's eyes. "Bank was about to foreclose. Weber's offer might have been your last chance to walk away with something. So, I burned him alive instead. That what you think of me, Tom?" The silence that followed hurt worse than any accusation. Mills finally looked up, and Cole saw not the man who'd shared beers at his wedding, but a sheriff building a case. "What I think doesn't matter much anymore. District Attorney's office is sending someone down. They'll want to talk about the accelerant traces found at the scene." Cole's stomach lurched. "The what?" "Gas can in the brush about 50 yards from Weber's place. Fresh prints in the mud nearby. Lab's running them now." Mills closed his notebook. "You still got those old work. Boots with the star pattern on the sole. The boots Sarah had given him 5 Christmases ago." Cole closed his eyes, remembering her excitement as he'd opened the box. "In my mudroom," he said quietly, "where they've been since Tuesday. We'll need those." Mills signaled to a deputy. "Along with any clothes you were wearing last night." Judge Hawkins signed the warrant an hour ago. The deputy who came to collect Cole's possessions was young, probably straight out of training. Cole recognized him as Matt Wheeler's boy. He'd coached his Little League team years back. Now the kid wouldn't meet his eyes as he snapped on latex gloves and bagged Cole's clothes as evidence. Through the station's windows, Cole caught glimpses of gathering crowds. News vans had begun arriving, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like accusing fingers. He thought of his ranch sitting empty, the animals needing care. "My horses—" Henderson said they'll look after the place, Mills cut in. "They're good folks who'd already decided he was guilty." Cole had seen Betty Henderson at the fire, had watched her pull her husband away when he'd tried to approach. 30 years of neighborly bonds, severed in a single night. The district attorney's representative arrived like a storm front, bringing with her an air of urban efficiency that seemed out of place in the small station. Her heels clicked sharply on the concrete floor as she approached Cole's cell, case files tucked under one arm. "Mr. Maddox." She didn't offer her hand. "I'm Andrea Morris from the DA's office. Given the severity of the charges and the evidence currently in our possession, we'll be requesting remand without bail at your arraignment tomorrow morning." Cole felt the last piece of his world slip away. "Without bail? I have a ranch to run." "You have a dead neighbor, Mr. Maddox, and a clear motive." She consulted her files. The foreclosure proceedings, the repeated conflicts over land use, the witnessed argument mere hours before the fire. The DA's office considers you a flight risk. Through the window, Cole watched another news van pull up. Somewhere in town, his neighbors were watching this unfold on their screens, shaking their heads at how the quiet widower had finally cracked. The ranch deed in his kitchen seemed a lifetime away now, its generations of honest work reduced to ash as surely as Weber's house. "Get some rest, Cole," Mills said quietly as he turned to leave. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Alone in his cell, Cole watched shadows lengthen across the floor, marking time's passage toward an arraignment that felt more like a foregone conclusion. He thought of Sarah, of how she'd always said the truth had a way of coming to light. But sitting there, watching his life unravel thread by thread, Cole wondered if sometimes the darkness didn't win after all. The diner receipt lay crumpled on the counter, coffee rings staining its edges. Sundance Cafe, 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee. Server, Alice. Time, 7:42 a.m. Like Dawson smoothed it flat with careful fingers, studying the morning's headlines, spread across the newspaper beside her plate. "Refill, honey." Alice, the waitress, held the coffee pot like a peace offering. Her eyes kept drifting to the courthouse. Across the street, where news vans clustered like vultures. "Please." Lark's voice was soft, practiced in the art of not drawing attention. 3 days in town had taught her the rhythms of the place, who watched what, who talked to whom. The diner was command central for local gossip, and she'd chosen her seat carefully. "Shame about the whole thing," Alice said, topping off Lark's cup. "Cole Maddox was always good people. Quiet since his wife passed, but good people." Lark noticed the past tense. Already the town had convicted him. "You knew him well." "Long as anyone. His Sarah used to come in every Sunday after church, always ordered the same thing." Alice's face softened with memory. "Cold sit right where you are now, watching her like she hung the moon." The bell above the door chimed, and 3 men in ranch wear entered, bringing with them the sharp October air and loud opinions about the upcoming arraignment. Lark kept her head down, but her ears open. "Bank's already circling that ranch," one said, settling heavily into a booth. "Weber's development company still wants the land. Guess they'll get it now, one way or another." "Convenient timing," Lark murmured into her coffee. Alice paused in wiping down the counter. "Something on your mind, honey?" Just thinking out loud. But Lark's mind was working, turning over details she'd gathered like pieces of a puzzle, the foreclosure notices she'd seen posted at the courthouse, the development plans filed 3 months ago when Weber's company had quietly bought up surrounding properties, the way the fire had started in 2 places at once, according to the morning paper, a detail buried on page 6. Through the diner's wide windows, she watched Cole Maddox being led from the police van into the courthouse. Even in handcuffs, he carried himself with a dignity that made something in her chest ache. He looked like her father had, that last day in court. Same proud bearing, same bewildered hurt in his eyes, like he couldn't quite believe the world had turned on him so completely. "Time's about up," Alice said gently, sliding the check across the counter. "They're clearing the courthouse for the arraignment." Lark's fingers found the folded papers in her jacket pocket. Documents she'd spent the night carefully preparing. The story they told was fiction, but the best lies were built on foundations of truth. She knew that better than most. "You heading over to watch?" Alice asked, making change from Lark's 20. "Something like that." Lark stood, leaving her coffee. Half finished. The courthouse steps were already crowded with reporters and locals, all hungry for the spectacle of a good man's fall. She thought of her father again, of promises made in a prison visiting room. "Sometimes," he told her, "the law needs a little help finding justice." She'd spent the years since his death learning exactly what he'd meant. The morning sun caught the courthouse's stone facade, making it glow like amber. Lark joined the stream of people filing through security, her story already settled into her bones like a second skin. The papers in her pocket felt warm, alive with possibility. She found a seat in the back of the courtroom, watching Cole Maddox's broad shoulders bend under the weight of chains and accusations. The prosecutor was young, ambitious, already playing. To the cameras with practiced gestures. The public defender looked overwhelmed, his notes scattered across the defense table like fallen leaves. When the judge asked for Cole's plea, his voice carried to the back of the room, clear and steady. "Not guilty, Your Honor." Lark's hand slipped into her pocket, fingers brushing the papers that could change everything. She'd done her research, knew the risks. One wrong detail, one question asked too deeply, and everything would unravel. But watching Cole stand alone, before the bench, she saw her father's ghost in every line of his face. The judge began reading the charges, his voice droning through the hushed courtroom. Lark felt time slow, crystallize. In moments, she would stand. In moments, she would speak words that could save a man or damn them both. Her heartbeat counted. Down the seconds, each pulse carrying her closer to a point of no return. The diner receipt crinkled in her pocket, a small reminder of her last quiet moment before stepping into someone else's story. Before becoming, for better or worse, Cole Maddox's last chance at justice. The blank marriage license application felt heavy in Lark's pocket, its crisp edges softened by nervous fingers. She'd filled out everything but the dates and signatures, each line a careful thread in a web of necessary deception. As Judge Harrison began the bail hearing, she watched the document's corner peek from her jacket like a white flag of surrender or revolution. "In the matter of the state of Wyoming versus Cole James Maddox," the judge intoned, peering over reading glasses that caught the fluorescent lighting. "The court will hear arguments regarding pre-trial detention." The prosecutor rose, smooth as silk. "Your Honor, given the severity of the charges and Mr. Maddox's substantial connections to the community, the state considers him an extreme flight risk. We request remand without bail." Cole stood motionless at the defense table, shoulders straight, despite the weight of his shackles. The morning light through the high windows turned his grey hair silver, highlighting the deep lines of fatigue etched around his eyes. "Your Honor," the public defender shuffled his papers, already looking defeated. "My client has no prior criminal record. He's a lifelong resident with significant property ties to the community. Property he's about to lose to foreclosure," the prosecutor cut in, "making him even more likely to flee jurisdiction." Lark's hand tightened around the papers in her pocket. 3 rows ahead, she saw Sheriff Mills shift uncomfortably in his seat. He'd known Cole for decades, had to testify against him anyway. The law was the law, but sometimes the law needed help seeing clearly. "Furthermore," the prosecutor continued, "the defendant has no family ties to the area since his wife's passing, no children, no siblings, nothing to keep him here except a failing ranch and mounting debt." The words hung in the air like smoke. Lark felt time slow, contract. Her heartbeat counted down the seconds. 3, 2, 1. That's not true. Her voice carried clear and strong through the courtroom, surprising even herself with its certainty. Heads turned, whispers rippled. She stood, papers clutched in steady hands. I'm his wife. The prosecutor froze mid-gesture. Cole's head snapped. Around, confusion and disbelief warring on his features, the judge's gavel cracked like summer thunder. "Young lady," Harrison warned, "this is a court of law, not a theater." "I have documentation, Your Honor." Lark moved forward, her boots silent on the worn carpet. The marriage license application rustled as she withdrew it. "We were married 3 months ago. Private ceremony. I've been away dealing with family matters in Idaho. I came as soon as I heard." The prosecutor's face flushed red. "Your Honor, this is clearly a fabrication. Let me see those papers." Judge Harrison's voice cut through the rising murmurs. Lark handed them to the bailiff, watching them make their journey to the bench. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained calm. She'd learned young that confidence sold a lie better than details. Cole hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. His eyes fixed on her face like a drowning man sighting land, equal parts hope and suspicion in his gaze. She didn't dare look directly at him. One wrong expression, one moment of hesitation, and everything would unravel. The judge studied the documents, frowning. These appeared to be in order, though not yet filed with the county clerk. "We were waiting," Lark said softly, letting a hint of emotion color her voice. His wife. His first wife. It still felt too soon to make it public. "We wanted to be respectful." A fresh wave of whispers swept the gallery. Lark caught fragments. "Young enough to be his daughter. Gold digger. Must be lying." But she also saw uncertainty creeping into some faces. The story was just uncomfortable enough, just socially awkward enough, to feel true. Harrison removed his glasses, polishing them slowly. Mrs. Maddox, you're willing to take responsibility for the defendant, ensure his appearance at trial?" "Yes, Your Honor." No hesitation, no flutter in her voice. "I'll stake everything I have on it." The prosecutor launched into objections. But Lark could see the judge had already made his decision. The ground had shifted. A man with a wife, however unlikely, was harder to paint as a flight risk than a desperate widower with nothing left to lose. "Defendant will be released on bond," Harrison announced, under the supervision of his spouse. "The court will require daily check-ins and surrender of his passport." The gavel fell again, sealing the decision. In the controlled chaos that followed, Lark finally allowed herself to meet Cole's eyes. She saw questions there, and warnings, and maybe a glimmer of hope. She gave him the smallest of nods, a promise and a prayer, wrapped in a single gesture. The marriage license application would never be filed, but the lie it carried had just bought them both some time. Now she only had to convince a suspicious rancher to trust a stranger with his life, and hope her own past didn't catch up with them both before she could uncover the truth about the fire that had started this whole dance. The conditions of release document lay between them on the truck's dashboard, its official letterhead stark against the weathered vinyl. Cole gripped the steering wheel of his old Ford, parked in the courthouse lot, reading the terms for the 3rd time. Defendant must reside at listed address, daily check-ins, remain within county limits, under direct supervision of spouse. "You want to ask?" Lark said quietly from the passenger seat. She hadn't touched the door handle yet, as if sensing they needed this moment before stepping into their shared fiction. "About why I did it." Cole studied her reflection in the windshield, this stranger who'd claimed to be his wife. She was younger than he'd first thought, barely out of her teens, with dark hair cut practical short, and eyes that carried too much knowledge for their years. "Would you tell me the truth if I did?" Probably not. A hint of a smile touched her lips. Not yet, anyway. Through the windshield they watched reporters packing up their gear, disappointed by the anticlimactic end to what should have been a simple remand hearing. Sheriff Mills stood by his patrol car, trying not to look like he was watching them. "We need to get our stories straight," Lark continued. "They'll be asking questions, looking for holes." "There's nothing but holes." Cole turned to face her fully. "You're not my wife, never met you before today. One phone call to Idaho will find carefully placed evidence of a quiet ceremony 3 months ago." She met his gaze steadily. I don't do anything halfway, Mr. Maddox. Cole, he corrected. Automatically. Suppose you better call me Cole, considering. The ghost of Sarah seemed to sit between them, filling the truck's cab with unspoken questions. Cole pushed away memories of other drives, other conversations in this same spot. You do realize what you've done? Perjury's a felony in Wyoming. So, is first-degree arson. Lark's voice remained gentle, but her eyes were steel. Did you do it? No. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Okay. Just like that? You believe me? I believe in patterns, Cole, in things that don't add up. She pulled a notebook from her bag, small and worn, like how the fire started in 2 places at once, like how Weber's development company filed updated plans 3 days before, removing your ranch from the project completely. Cole felt his breath catch. How did you... Public records, people talk, especially to someone they think isn't listening. She glanced at the courthouse. We should go. Your neighbors are getting curious. He followed her gaze to where a small crowd had gathered, watching them with undisguised interest. Betty Henderson was among them, phone raised like a shield. By nightfall, pictures of Cole with his young wife would be all over social media. The key felt heavy in his hand as he turned it in the ignition. I hope you know what you're doing. So do I. Lark settled back in her seat, clutching her bag like it contained secrets. Maybe it did. Take us home, Cole. We've got a lot of work to do. The truck's engine rumbled to life, a familiar sound in a world that had stopped making sense. As they pulled away from the courthouse, Cole caught Sheriff Mills' eye in the rear-view mirror. The man's expression was unreadable, but his hand moved to his notebook, jotting down something that would probably end up in a file somewhere. The conditions of release fluttered on the dashboard as they turned onto the main road, headed for a ranch that had only ever known one Mrs. Maddox. Cole felt the weight of Sarah's memory, of decades of honest living, pressing down on him. Yet, somewhere beneath the guilt and confusion, a spark of hope flickered to life. This strange young woman, with her careful lies and hidden motives, might be his only chance at proving his innocence. He just had to trust her, or at least trust that her reasons for helping him would keep them both alive long enough to uncover the truth. The late afternoon sun caught Lark's profile as she watched the town recede behind them. For a moment she looked almost familiar, like someone he should remember but couldn't quite place. Then she turned to him with those 2 knowing eyes, and he wondered if he'd ever really know her at all. The yellowed newspaper clipping fluttered from Lark's notebook as she slept, curled uncomfortably in Sarah's old reading chair. Cole picked it up with careful fingers, the Idaho Statesman's headline catching the dawn light. Local judge's daughter missing after controversial verdict. Below it, a younger Lark smiled from a grainy photograph, her hair longer than, her eyes less guarded. He shouldn't read it. Trust went both ways, and God knew they needed every scrap they could get. But his eyes caught fragments anyway. Rachel, Davis 17, disappeared following her father's controversial ruling. Judge Marcus Davies found dead in apparent suicide, accusations of judicial corruption. Rachel Davies. Not Lark Dawson. Find what you're looking for. Her voice, soft but alert, made him start. She hadn't moved, hadn't opened her eyes, but the tension in her shoulders told him she'd been awake for some time, wasn't looking for anything. He set the clipping on the side table. Fell out of your notebook, like a lot of things, I expect. Now she did open her eyes, meeting his gaze with a directness that reminded him of Sarah. Going to call the sheriff? Cole settled into the chair opposite her, the same chair he'd been sitting in when he first spotted Weber's fire. Depends what else you're not telling me. The morning light painted stark shadows across Lark's, Rachel's face as she sat up. She reached for the clipping but didn't pick it up, just let her fingers rest against its edge. My father was a good man, an honest judge, until he wasn't. What changed? Someone made him choose between his integrity and his daughter's life. Her voice carried old pain, carefully contained. He chose me. Then he couldn't live with the choice. Outside, the ranch was coming alive with morning sounds, horses nickering for feed, ancient windmill creaking in the autumn breeze. Normal sounds that felt at odds with the weight of confession hanging in the air. Weber's Development Company, Locke continued, operates through a maze of shell corporations. One of them showed up in my father's case files. I've been tracking their operations ever since, watching for patterns. Cole leaned forward. You think they're connected? Weber's death and your father's case. I think nothing in their world happens by accident. She finally picked up the clipping, folded it with precise movements. The fire that killed Weber, it wasn't meant for him. The accelerant pattern, the timing, it was professional work, meant to look amateur, meant to frame you. The implications settled like stone in Cole's stomach. Why me? Because you wouldn't sell. Because your land connects two major parcels in their development plan. Because a convicted murderer can't own property from prison. Her eyes held his. Take your pick. A truck rumbled past on the access road. Probably the Hendersons, checking on them under the guise of neighborly concern. Cole waited until the sound faded before speaking again. You took an awful risk, claiming to be my wife. If they're as dangerous as you say, I took a calculated risk. She stood, stretching muscles stiff from the awkward sleeping position. Besides, I'm already dead to everyone who matters. Rachel Davies disappeared 2 years ago. Locke Dawson is just another fake ID in a long series of them, until now. Cole gestured to the window, where another curious vehicle was slowing as it passed. Whole town's watching us. Photos, social media, you've made yourself visible. A smile touched her lips, sharp as a blade's edge. Maybe that's exactly what I needed. Cole studied her, this young woman with her dead father's case files and her carefully constructed lies. She'd thrown herself into his mess, or maybe he'd been drawn into hers. As the way they were tangled together now. We're going to need proof, he said finally. Real proof, not just theories and connections. Already working on it. She pulled her notebook close, flipping to a page dense with neat handwriting. But first, we need to convince this town that our marriage isn't just a convenient legal, a fiction. Betty Henderson's been parked at the end of the drive for 10 minutes, pretending to check her mail. Cole felt a flush creep up his neck. How do we do that? Well, Locke said, her tone shifting to something softer, more public, clearly meant to carry, first, husband, you're going to make us breakfast. Then we're going to walk out to check the horses together, looking appropriately newlywed despite our troubles. She smiled, and for a moment he could see why she'd survived so long on her own. And then we're going to start asking some very careful questions about the night of the fire. Through the window, Betty Henderson's car finally pulled away. But Cole knew the performance was just beginning. They were actors now, playing parts in a drama where missing a line could get them both killed. The fire inspector's report sat between them on the kitchen table, its clinical language at odds with the violence it described. Locke had somehow obtained a copy. Cole decided not to ask how, and now they studied it together over cooling coffee, reading between the lines of official jargon. Look here, Locke said, tapping a paragraph dense with technical terms. They found traces of thermite. It's not the kind of accelerant your average arsonist picks up at the hardware store. Thermite. Cole leaned closer, their shoulders almost touching, a calculated move as Betty Henderson was visible through the window, puttering suspiciously long with her garden beds despite the October chill. Burns hot enough to melt steel. Military grade. Locke's voice dropped lower. The report calls it unidentified chemical accelerant, but I've seen this pattern before. The real question is why use something so sophisticated, then leave obvious boot prints leading to your property? Cole sat. And back, processing. Through the window he watched Betty finally give up her gardening pretense and head inside. To make sure I'd be blamed, but why go to all that trouble? Why not just burn down my ranch instead? Because this wasn't just about you. Locke flipped through her notebook, cross-referencing dates. Weber was meeting someone that night. His cell records show a call at 9:47 p.m. just before the fire. Number traces back to a burner phone. How did you get his phone records? A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Better not to ask. She paused, head tilting. Someone's coming. The crunch of tires on gravel preceded a sharp knock. Sheriff Mills stood on their porch, looking uncomfortable in the early morning light. Cole opened the door, conscious of Lark quickly tucking the report out of sight. "Tom!" Cole kept his voice neutral. "Kind of early for a check-in. Not official business." Mills glanced past him to where Lark sat at the kitchen table, the picture of domestic tranquility in one of Sarah's old sweaters. "Got something you might want to see." He handed Cole a manila envelope, worn at the edges. "Found this in Weber's old case files. Thought it was odd he had a whole folder on your ranch, dating back 3 years before he ever made an offer." Cole felt Lark move to his side, playing her role of concerned wife perfectly. The envelope contained survey maps, property assessments, and something that made his blood run cold. Detailed plans for rerouting the creek that fed his pastures, dated months before the first drought hit. "They engineered your water problems," Lark said softly. "Made sure you'd be desperate when they came with their offer." Mills shifted his weight, badge catching the morning sun. "I'm not supposed to be here, not supposed to be showing you this. But I've known you 30 years, Cole. Something about this whole thing hasn't sat right from the start. Why show us now?" Lark's question carried an edge beneath its gentle tone. "Because someone broke into the evidence locker last night. Files gone, including the original fire inspector's report. Got a call this morning that the lab testing the boot prints had a convenient power failure. Lost all their samples." Mills looked troubled. "Way this is going might not be much of a case left by trial time." "Isn't that good news?" Cole asked, but he already knew the answer. "Not if someone's cleaning house." Mills straightened, official manner returning. "Just wanted you to know. Whatever's going on, it's bigger than a ranch dispute." After he left, Cole and Lark stood in the kitchen, morning light painting patterns. Across the scattered papers, the fire inspector's report seemed to mock them from its hiding place. "He's right," Lark said finally. "They're tying up loose ends. Weber must have gotten cold feet, threatened to talk." "About what?" "That's what we need to find out." She gathered the papers with quick, efficient movements. "The company's local office closes for lunch at noon. Secretary leaves her computer logged in while she goes to the diner across the street. Every day, like clockwork." Cole felt his chest would tighten. "You want to break in broad daylight?" "No," she said, eyes glinting. "I want us to walk in through the front door, like a concerned couple asking about property values. While you keep the receptionist busy, I'll see what interesting files might be lying around on that computer." It was madness, the kind of madness that could get them both arrested, or worse, if Mills was right about people cleaning house. But looking at the survey maps, the carefully planned destruction of his livelihood, Cole felt something harden inside him. "Better fix your lipstick, Mrs. Maddox," he said, surprising them both with a hint of his old humor. "If we're playing newlyweds house hunting, you'll want to look the part." Lark's answering smile held equal parts approval and warning. They were crossing a line, moving from defensive to offensive. But as Cole watched her transform herself with a few practiced touches, shoulders softening, walk becoming less purposeful, a mask of wide-eyed innocence settling over her sharp features, he realized she'd been preparing for this moment all along. The fire inspector's report vanished into her bag, another piece of evidence in a puzzle that grew more dangerous with each new revelation. They had until noon to prepare their performance. After that, they'd find out just how far their enemies would go to keep their secrets buried. The anonymous letter appeared on their windshield while they were inside Weber Development's office. Plain white envelope, no markings, held down by a single wiper blade. Inside, typed in nondescript font, "You're asking dangerous questions. Weber asked them too. Back off, or what happened to the judge will happen to you both." Lark's hands trembled slightly as she read it, afternoon sun warming the truck's cab. Cole watched her fold the paper with mechanical precision, turning it into smaller and smaller squares until it nearly disappeared in her palm. "They were watching us," he said quietly. "The whole time we were in there." Of course they were. Her voice was steady, belying the tension in her shoulders. But they waited until after we left to deliver this. They wanted to see what we found. First, what they'd found was worth watching. While Cole had charmed the receptionist with questions about property values and local schools, playing the besotted new husband showing his young wife potential homes, Lark had moved through the office like a ghost. Her phone, held casually as she admired architectural details, had captured images of documents left carelessly on desks. The computer, still logged in just as she'd predicted, had yielded darker treasures. Shell companies, she said now, pulling out her phone. Dozens of them, all leading back to something called Meridian Holdings. They've been buying up ranches across 3 states, always the same pattern. Engineered water problems, mysterious accidents, sudden foreclosures. Like Weber did to me. Weber was just a front man. Look at this. She pulled up a photo of an email thread she'd found. He was skimming money, threatening to expose the whole operation. The night of the fire, he had a meeting scheduled with the FBI. Cole felt the pieces clicking into place. That's why they needed him dead, and why they needed someone else to take the blame. A struggling rancher with a history of conflicts with the victim. Perfect patsy. Lark's fingers drummed against her thigh, a nervous tell he was learning to recognize. But Weber kept records, insurance. There's a safe in his home office. What's left of it? Fire hot enough to melt steel. She met his eyes. Hot enough to destroy evidence. But they must not be sure they got everything, or they wouldn't be warning us off. Through the windshield, Cole watched people coming and going from the development office. Normal people doing normal jobs, probably unaware they were part of something darker. How many other lives had been ruined by the machinery working behind? That respectable facade? Rachel, he said softly, using her real name for the first time. What happened to your father? Really? She was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she did, her voice carried the weight of long-buried truth. He discovered a similar pattern in Idaho. Land grabs, forced sales, all traced back. To shell companies, he was about to issue subpoenas. Her hands clenched in her lap. Then they took me, held me for 3 days, said they'd kill me if he didn't bury the investigation. And he did. He buried everything. Signed whatever they put in front of him. Then he went home and put his service revolver in his mouth. The words fell like stones. They made it look like corruption, like he'd taken bribes. His suicide was their final proof of guilt. The anonymous letter seemed to pulse between them like a living thing. Cole thought of Sarah, of how she'd always said a person's true character showed in how they faced their fears. He watched Lark unfold the letter, smooth it flat against her knee. They're telling us we have a choice, she said. Same choice they gave my father. What do you want to do? She turned to him, and he saw in her eyes the same steel he'd felt forming in his own heart. I want to finish what my father started, but this time we do it smart. We gather everything, build a case they can't bury or burn. And if they come after us, then we give them something they've never faced before. Her smile was sharp as broken glass. A rancher with nothing left to lose, and a dead girl with nothing left to fear. Cole started the truck, decision made. They had enemies now, powerful ones, who thought they were playing a familiar game. But Sarah had always said God looked after fools and righteous causes. Maybe, just this once, they could be both. The anonymous letter rode between them as they pulled away, a declaration of war disguised as a warning. Behind them, someone in the development office picked up a phone, and another piece of their enemy's machinery creaked into motion. The hospital bracelet itched against Cole's wrist. Maddox! Cole J. Admitted 2347, under the harsh fluorescent lights. The plastic band seemed to glow. A stark reminder of how quickly everything had gone wrong. They'd been careful. That's what kept running through his mind as he sat in the emergency room, holding an ice pack to his ribs. They'd been careful, but careful hadn't been enough. Stop fidgeting, Lark murmured from the chair beside him. Her knuckles were scraped, raw, a bruise darkening along her jaw. You'll pull the stitches. The cut above his eye had only needed 3, but the doctor had warned it would scar. Cole touched it gently, remembering the glint of brass knuckles in the barn's shadowy interior. Professional job, very. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. They knew exactly when we'd be checking the horses. Knew the ranch layout too. Disabled. The security lights before they came in. The attack had been swift, efficient. 2 men, faces hidden by ski masks, waiting in the shadows of the barn. They hadn't said a word, hadn't asked questions. They'd simply started throwing punches, aimed, to hurt but not kill. A warning, written in bruises and blood. What they hadn't counted on was Lark. Cole watched her now, this slight young woman who'd moved like liquid lightning when the first punch was thrown. He'd seen her take down a man twice her size with terrifying precision, turning the attacker's momentum against him. Her father, the judge, might have arranged for more than just legal education during those years before everything went wrong. Where did you learn to fight like that? A ghost of a smile touched her split lip. Same place I learned to forge documents and hack computers. The streets teach you things if you're motivated enough to learn. A nurse passed by their curtained alcove, pausing to check Cole's vitals for the 100th time. They waited until her footsteps faded before continuing. They'll try again, Cole said quietly. Next time they won't underestimate you. No, Lark agreed. Next time they'll come harder, which means we're getting close to something. She pulled out her phone, showing him a photo she'd managed to take during the fight. One of the attackers had lost his mask in the scuffle, revealing a face Cole recognized. That's Weber's old foreman, Marcus Tucker, who supposedly quit and moved to Arizona 3 months ago. Lark's fingers flew over her phone's screen. But his bank records show regular deposits from a familiar shell company. He's their cleaner, Cole. When things get messy, he makes them neat again. Cole felt the weight of his hospital bracelet like a shackle, like Weber's death, like what they wanted to do to me. But tonight was different. This was a message, not a cleanup. She leaned closer, voice dropping. They wanted us scared, wanted us to back off. Which means whatever's in Weber's safe is worth protecting. Through the curtain, they could hear the bustle of the emergency room, the normal dramas of a small-town hospital playing out around them. Soon the sheriff would arrive to take their statement. Another attack on a man accused of murder, another layer of suspicion to navigate. We can't go back to the ranch, Cole said. Not tonight. Already handled. Called in an anonymous tip about suspicious activity near the property. Sheriff's deputies will be watching the place all night. That, sharp smile again, despite her split lip. And I got us a room at the Mountain View Motel, registered under one of my other names. Cole felt heat rise in his face. A room? We're supposed to be married, remember? Besides, her expression softened slightly. You probably have a concussion. Someone needs to wake you every few hours. He studied her in the unforgiving hospital light, this young woman who fought like a professional, planned like a strategist, and carried enough ghosts in her eyes to fill a graveyard. She'd saved his life tonight, and not just with her combat skills. If she hadn't been there, if she hadn't arranged their cover story and planned their next move even while their attackers were still picking themselves up off the barn floor. Thank you, he said quietly, for staying, for fighting. Well, she touched her bruised jaw carefully. You're my husband, aren't you? For better or worse. The words were light, almost playful, but something deeper moved beneath them. They'd crossed another line tonight, moved from allies to something more complicated. Trust, born in violence, cemented by shared pain and purpose. The hospital bracelet caught the light as Cole reached for her hand, surprising them both. She let him take it, her calloused fingers wrapping around his with careful strength. They sat like that, silent and connected, waiting for the sheriff and whatever would come next. Outside their curtained sanctuary, the world was shifting. Enemies were regrouping, and tomorrow would bring new dangers. But for now, in the quiet space between one breath and the next, they were simply 2 people holding on against the dark. The land development plans covered the motel room's small table. Their Crisp corporate letterhead, at odds with the faded wallpaper and worn carpet. Lark had spread them out like a general mapping a battlefield, each document another piece of ammunition in their coming fight. "Look at the water rights applications," she said, pointing to a stack of permits. "They didn't just target your ranch. They've been redirecting water from every property they want to acquire. Systematic environmental manipulation across 3 states. Cole leaned over her shoulder, trying to focus on the documents instead of the domestic intimacy of sharing the small room. His ribs protested the movement, a reminder of last night's violence. Weber was gathering evidence? More than evidence. He was building a RICO case. Lark pulled out a flash drive she'd recovered from the development office. These files show money transfers through at least 30 shell companies, land theft, environmental crimes, bribes to local officials, all leading back to Meridian Holdings. The same company that killed your father. The same company that's about to make a mistake. Her voice carried that edge he was learning to recognize, the one that meant she was seeing patterns others would miss. They're desperate to find whatever Weber hid in that safe, which means we have leverage. Dawn was breaking outside their second-floor window, painting the Sundance Mountains in watercolor shades of rose and gold. They'd spent the night plotting, planning, piecing together the puzzle of corruption that had claimed so many lives. Now, watching Lark work, Cole saw echoes of her father, the judge. The same dedication to justice, the same unflinching courage in the face of evil. "We can't just walk into Weber's burned-out house," he said. "Place is probably watched. We don't have to." She pulled out her phone, showing him a series of text messages. "I've been corresponding with Weber's sister in Denver. The insurance company finally cleared the property for cleaning. She's hired a salvage crew to start work tomorrow." Understanding dawned. "And you've got us on the crew. Under different names, of course. The safe's in the basement. Concrete. Walls, steel reinforcement. That kind of fire, hot enough to melt metal. It would have protected anything inside, not destroyed it." Cole studied the development plans again, seeing not just maps and permits, but a web of deliberate destruction. How many other ranchers had faced what he had? How many families had lost everything to this invisible enemy? "If we get caught, we get one shot at this." Lark's hand covered his on the papers, her touch grounding him. "The salvage crew starts at 8. By 9, the workers take their smoke break. That gives us 12 minutes to get into the basement, crack the safe, and get what we need." "You know how to crack a safe?" That ghost of a smile played across her lips. "I know how to do a lot of things. The question is, can you handle the physical labor with those ribs? We need to look like real salvage workers." He straightened, ignoring the pull of bruised muscles. "I've worked through worse." "I know you have." Her voice softened slightly. "That's what they've always counted on. Good people trying to hold on through whatever they throw at them. But this time we're throwing back." They spent the next hour going over the plans. Lark had thought of everything. Work clothes appropriately stained with dirt and sweat, tools that would pass inspection, even the right kind of cheap coffee in disposable cups. Their cover identities were detailed enough to withstand casual scrutiny. Carl and Jenny Morris, married 3 years, working salvage jobs across the Mountain West. "Your wedding ring," Cole said suddenly. "Real salvage workers doing manual labor. You'll need one that looks worn." Lark went still for a moment, then reached into her bag. She pulled out a simple gold band on a chain, Sarah's ring, which Cole had kept in his bedside drawer. He'd wondered why she'd grabbed it during their hasty exit from the ranch. "I thought we might need it," she said quietly. Is it okay?" Cole looked at the ring, catching the morning light. The ring he'd placed on Sarah's finger 20 years ago, now being repurposed for their desperate gambit. Sarah would have understood, he thought. Might even have approved of this fierce young woman using it to fight for justice. "It's okay," he said, and was surprised to find he meant it. "Let me." His fingers trembled slightly as he took the chain, unthreaded the ring. Lark's hand was steady as he slipped the band onto her finger, both of them pretending not to notice how perfectly it fit. "There," she said softly. Now we look the part. The land development plans rustled in the morning. Breeze from the open window, pages of corruption and greed spread out before them. But Cole found himself looking at Sarah's ring on Lark's hand, thinking about real marriages and false ones, about the strange ways fate drew people together in common cause. Tomorrow they would step into the lion's den, armed with nothing but courage and careful plans. But today, in this shabby motel room with its faded wallpaper and morning light, they were building something true out of necessary lies. Cole only hoped they'd live long enough to see it through. The voice recording crackled through Lark's phone. Weber's final words preserved in digital clarity. "If you're hearing this, I'm already dead. The evidence in this safe will prove everything, the water rights manipulation, the shell companies, the bribes. Meridian Holdings isn't just stealing land, they're destroying lives, and now they want me to help them destroy Cole Maddox." Cole heard these words through his earpiece as he hauled debris from Weber's ruined study, playing the role of salvage worker with aching authenticity. His ribs protested each movement, but the pain helped him focus. Around him, the real salvage. Crew worked methodically, unaware that their two newest members were anything but ordinary laborers. 8 minutes, Lark's voice came through the earpiece, disguised by the dust mask she wore. She was working near the basement entrance, timing the crew's movements. Tucker's car just pulled up outside. Cole's hands tightened on his work gloves. Marcus Tucker, Weber's former foreman, the man who'd tried to beat them into silence 2 nights ago, was now watching the salvage operation. Watching them, though he didn't know it yet. 7 minutes. "To break," Lark continued. "Stay casual." The basement beckoned through its charred doorway, relatively untouched by the fire that had consumed the upper floors. Down there, behind a false wall Weber had mentioned in his recording, waited the safe and whatever evidence it contained. Evidence worth killing for. Tucker's voice carried from outside, speaking to the crew boss. Cole kept his head down, letting his cap shadow his face. The bruises from their last encounter were hidden under 2 days' growth of beard, but there was no point taking chances. Smoke break. The crew boss's call came right on schedule. The other workers began filing out, sharing cigarettes and complaints. About the work, Cole made a show of stretching his back, catching Lark's subtle nod. Going to check the electrical panel, she called to no one in particular, her voice pitched higher than normal, carrying just a hint of Texas drawl. "Need to make sure it's safe before we hit the lower level." Cole waited 30 seconds, then headed for the basement stairs. Every step felt like walking on glass, knowing Tucker was somewhere above them, knowing how quickly everything could go wrong. The basement air was thick with moisture and ash. Lark was already at the false wall, tools moving with practiced efficiency. 5 minutes, she whispered. Recording gave us the combination, but this mechanism's fire damaged. Might have to do it by feel. Cole positioned himself near the stairs, ostensibly checking support beams, but really listening for movement above. The crew's muffled voices carried through the ceiling, along with Tucker's heavier footsteps. Come on, Lark muttered, fingers working the dial with delicate precision. Each click seemed thunderous in the basement's close air. Footsteps on the stairs. Company, Cole breathed into his mic. Tucker's voice reached them before he did. Hey, Morris, boss wants... He froze on the bottom step, recognition flooding his face. Cole saw the moment Tucker's hand moved toward his jacket, saw Lark still focused on the safe, too far to help. Cole moved without thinking, closing the distance before Tucker could reach whatever weapon he carried. They crashed into the base of the stairs, the impact sending fresh waves of pain through Cole's injured ribs. Tucker was younger, trained for violence, but Cole had the desperate strength of a man with everything to lose. They grappled in the dim light, neither able to risk noise that would draw attention. Tucker's fingers clawed for Cole's eyes, but years of ranch work had made Cole's hands strong. He caught Tucker's wrist, twisted, felt something give. Got it! Lark's triumphant whisper carried across the basement. Tucker bucked beneath Cole, trying to shout. Cole drove his elbow into the man's solar plexus, forcing the air from his lungs. Behind him, he heard the safe door open, heard Lark's quick intake of breath, files, photos, and she went silent. Cole, there's a gun. Little late for that, he managed through gritted teeth, struggling to keep Tucker pinned. No, I mean it's Weber's gun, with prints on it. They staged his suicide, but he left proof. Evidence of... A noise from above cut her off. Crews coming back. Time crystallized into choices. Cole met Tucker's eyes, saw the calculation there, the recognition that everything was falling apart. Helper's entrance, Cole said to Lark. Through the coal chute. Go. Not without... Go! He heard her quick footsteps, the sound of evidence. Being stowed in her work vest, Tucker chose that moment to drive his knee up, catching Cole in his injured ribs. Pain exploded through his chest, but he held on, buying seconds with agony. The coal chute scraped open, then closed. Voices approached from above. Only then did Cole release his hold, stumbling back from Tucker just as work boots appeared on. The stairs. Everything okay down there? The crew boss called. Tucker rose slowly, straightening his clothes, death in his eyes. Just checking the support beams with Morris here, he said smoothly. Looks like we might have some structural issues to deal with. Cole met Tucker's gaze, saw the promise of violence there, but he also saw fear. Whatever Lark had found in that safe had scared Tucker badly enough to make him cautious, even now. Might want to call in some experts, Cole agreed, his voice steady, despite the fire in his ribs. Never know what kind of secrets these old houses hide. Above them, the salvage crew resumed work, unaware of the battle that had played out in their midst. But the war was far from over. Somewhere in the October sunshine, Lark was running with evidence that could bring down an empire. All Cole had to do was walk out of this basement alive to help her use it. The confession letter trembled in Lark's hands as she read it aloud in Sheriff Mills's office. I, Frank Weber, being of sound mind, hereby confess to my role in the systematic theft and destruction of agricultural properties across Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. Her voice caught on the next words. Including my participation in the conspiracy that led to the death of Judge Marcus Davies. Cole sat beside her, his ribs freshly taped by the department's medic. Through the office windows, he could see Tucker in handcuffs, being led to a waiting federal vehicle. The man's face was a mask of cold fury, but his eyes held something Cole recognized from his own mirror, the look of someone watching their world collapse. Weber was going to expose everything, Lark continued reading, but he wanted to save himself first. This letter, the financial records, the documented bribes, it was all his insurance policy. Sheriff Mills studied the stack of evidence spread. Across his desk, photos, ledgers, hard drives recovered from Weber's safe, and they killed him for it, made it look like Maddox did it. They didn't count on Weber having a second safe, Cole said, one not even Tucker knew about. Behind them, the office television played silent footage of FBI agents raiding Meridian Holdings' regional office. Lark's careful organization of Weber's evidence had given federal prosecutors everything they needed for warrants. The dominoes were falling, one after another. Judge Davies' death hit Weber hard, Lark said quietly, smoothing the confession letter with careful fingers. He'd been the one to suggest using me as leverage. When my father killed himself, something in Weber broke. He spent the next 2 years gathering evidence, preparing for the day he could make it right. Cole watched her face as she read her father's name again. The bruise along her jaw was darkening, but her eyes were clear, focused. She'd fought her way through grief and shadows to reach this moment. They both had. What I can't figure, Mills said, is how you knew, Rachel, how you traced it all back to here. Lark's head snapped up at her real name. Mills raised a calming hand. FBI briefed me an hour ago about everything. Your father's case, your disappearance, all of it. You've been hunting them a long time. They left patterns, she said after a moment. Shell companies, water rights manipulation, sudden accidents, always the same playbook. When I saw what was happening to Cole's ranch, I knew I'd found them again. And the marriage thing. Mills's voice carried a hint of his old humor. That part of the plan too? Cole felt heat rise in his face, but Lark's answer was steady. I needed a way in, needed to buy time, didn't expect. She glanced at Cole, something soft flickering in her expression. Didn't expect a lot of things. A knock at the door interrupted whatever Mills might have said next. An FBI agent entered, carrying more files. "Sheriff, we've got confirmation. The bribes went all the way up to the State Water Board. Meridian's CEO is in custody, along with half their board of directors. And the evidence?" Lark's voice was sharp. "It's secure, safe in federal hands. Weber's confession alone is enough to clear Mr. Maddox of all charges. The DA's drawing up the paperwork now." Cole felt something tight in his chest finally loosen. He looked at the confession letter, thinking of Weber's last act of conscience. The man had been an enemy, had nearly destroyed Cole's life. But in the end, he'd tried to make it right. "There's something else," the agent said. "In Weber's personal effects. A letter addressed to you, Mr. Maddox. Apparently he wrote it the night he died. The envelope was thin, containing only a single sheet of paper. Cole opened it carefully, reading words written by a man who'd known he was about to die. "Cole, I know an apology means nothing now, but I'm trying to make it right. The water rights to your ranch were never legally transferred. I falsified the documents. Look in the safe's second compartment. You'll find the original deeds, still in your... The water was always yours. I hope you can rebuild. And I hope someday you'll understand that some men get so lost in the dark, they forget how to find their way back to the light." Lark's hand found his as he read, her fingers interlacing with his. She still wore Sarah's ring. Not for show now, not for cover, but because neither of them had thought to remove it after the salvage operation. Outside Mills's office, phones rang with news of more arrests. The machinery of justice was grinding into motion, slowly righting years of wrongs. But in that quiet room, surrounded by evidence of corruption and redemption, Cole found himself thinking not of revenge or vindication, but of second chances. Weber had found his way back to the light, too late to save himself, but in time to save others. Looking at Lark, at Rachel, Cole wondered if perhaps they'd all been given a chance to start again, to build something true from the ashes of necessary lies. The town hall minutes recorded it as Special Emergency Session RE Weber Development. Investigation. But that sterile heading couldn't capture the emotion churning through the packed chamber. Cole sat in the back row, Lark beside him, watching Mayor Henderson struggle to maintain order as decades of secrets spilled into the open. The federal investigation has confirmed systematic corruption affecting water rights across multiple properties, Henderson read from a prepared statement. All affected landowners will be contacted regarding restitution and the restoration of their original water access. The crowd murmured, faces Cole had known all his life, now twisted with anger and shame. Betty Henderson, the mayor's wife, couldn't meet his eyes. She'd been among the loudest voices condemning him after Weber's death. "Furthermore," the mayor continued, "the town council wishes to extend its formal apology to Cole Maddox for," his voice caught, personal emotion breaking through official protocol, "for failing our duty as neighbors and friends, for believing the worst without question." Lark's hand found Cole's, Sarah's ring warm against his fingers. She'd tried to remove it that morning, but he'd stopped her. Some things, once given, couldn't be easily undone. 7 families, someone called from the crowd. 7 families lost their land to Weber's schemes. How do we make that right? "The FBI has frozen Meridian's assets," Henderson replied. "There will be compensation, but money doesn't fix everything." The new voice belonged to Jim Parker, who'd lost his dairy farm 2 years ago. He turned in his seat to face Cole. "You tried to warn us, didn't you? About the water rights, about Weber's pressure tactics. We didn't want to hear it." Cole remembered those conversations, remembered the frustration of watching his neighbors fall one by one to a threat they refused to see. "We were all afraid," he said quietly. "Fear makes it hard to see clear." "Fear and greed," Lark added, her voice carrying in the hushed chamber. Meridian Holdings counted on both. They'd done it before, in other towns, other states. My father— She paused, then continued stronger. "Judge Davies tried to stop them in Idaho. It cost him everything." A ripple went through the crowd as connections clicked into place. They'd all seen the news by now, understood who Lark really was and why she'd come to their town. Some faces showed sympathy, others calculation, but Cole was proud to see mostly respect in their eyes. Betty Henderson rose suddenly, her voice trembling. "I baked a casserole when Sarah died, brought it over, told you if you ever needed anything." She wiped at her eyes. "Then the first time you really needed us, we all turned our backs." "Not all," Cole said, thinking of Sheriff Mills, of the few who doubted, who'd questioned. "And not forever." The mayor cleared his throat, consulting his notes. "The council has prepared a resolution, formally expunging any record of the accusations against Mr. Maddox from town records. Additionally, we've established a community oversight committee for all future water rights and development proposals." More was said about investigations and restitution, about new safeguards and old wounds. Cole let the words wash over him, focusing instead on the faces around him. These were his neighbors, his community. They'd believed the worst of him. Yes, but they'd also raised him, celebrated his marriage to Sarah, mourned with him at her funeral. People were complicated things, capable of both judgment and grace. "There's something else," Henderson said as the meeting wound down. "The FBI found evidence that the drought conditions affecting Maddox Ranch and surrounding properties were artificially created. With the manipulation stopped, the water table is already beginning to recover." Cole felt his throat tighten. He'd watched his pastures brown and die, watched his cattle grow thin, all because of human greed rather than nature's curse. But nature was resilient. Like truth, like hope, it found a way to survive. The meeting dissolved into smaller conversations, people approaching Cole in ones and twos. Some offered awkward apologies, others simple handshakes that carried more meaning than words. Through it all, Lark stayed beside him, her presence both anchor and shield. "Ready to go home?" she asked quietly when the last well-wisher had moved. Away, home. The ranch would need work, months of repair and restoration to undo the damage of manufactured drought. The town, too, would need time to heal, to rebuild trust, fractured by fear and suspicion. But looking at Lark, seeing the future in her eyes, Cole knew some damages could become foundations for something stronger. "Yeah," he said, leading her toward the door. Outside, the October sun painted the mountains in shades of promise, and somewhere on his ranch, a spring was beginning to flow again. The new ranch paperwork sat untouched on the kitchen table, stark white against the worn wood, where Sarah's coffee cups had left rings over the years. 2 sets of documents, one to restore Cole's water rights, and another, still blank, that would add a second name to the Maddox Ranch deed. Lark stood at the window, watching the first snow of November dust the pastures. She'd taken to wearing Sarah's old work jacket, and something about the sight made Cole's heart ache in ways he couldn't quite name. "The FBI wants me to testify in Idaho," she said without turning, "against the people who ordered my father's death. Could take months." "I know." Cole poured coffee into 2 cups, his usual mug, and Sarah's sunflower one, which had somehow become Lark's over the past weeks. "You've been trying to tell me for days." Now she did turn, accepting the coffee with a small smile. "Been trying to find the right words, to explain why I have to go, why you can't stay." He kept his voice gentle. "Rachel Davies needs to reclaim her name, her life. Can't do that hiding in Wyoming as Lark Dawson." She flinched slightly at her real name. The marriage deception, the false identity, the FBI's buried it all. "Part of the deal for my testimony," Her fingers traced the rim of Sarah's mug. No one would ever know it happened, but we would. The morning light caught Sarah's ring, still on Lark's finger. Neither of them had mentioned it since the day at Weber's house, letting it become part of their careful dance around truth and pretense. "I'm not Sarah," Lark said suddenly, fiercely. "I won't ever be Sarah, and whatever this is between us, it started with a lie." "Did it?" Cole moved closer, close enough to see the uncertainty in her eyes. "Or did it start with you choosing to help a stranger? With you fighting for justice, when everyone else had given up?" She set the coffee down, hands trembling slightly. "I told myself it was just about finding my father's killers, about finally bringing them down." Her voice dropped. "Didn't expect to find a home in the middle of it all." Cole looked around the kitchen, at the dishes they'd washed together, the chair where she'd fallen asleep, reading case files, the window where they'd watched the water return to his streams. She'd filled the spaces Sarah's death had left empty, not by replacing those memories, but by creating new ones alongside them. "The ranch needs work," he said carefully. "Lots of repairs, new equipment. Could use a partner with a head for numbers and a talent for seeing through lies. Cole, take the time you need," he continued. "Go to Idaho. Testify. Find justice for your father. The paperwork will be here when you're done." He touched the blank partnership deed. "If you want it." Lark picked up Sarah's ring, turning it in the morning light. "You know what people would say. The age difference, the circumstances, people will always talk. Question is, do we let them decide our story?" She studied him for a long moment. This young woman who'd crashed into his life with a desperate lie and stayed to fight for truth, who'd known exactly what Sarah's ring would mean when she put it on, and who'd worn it like a promise ever since. "I need to do this right," she said finally. "Need to face my past. Become Rachel Davies again before I can be—" She paused, letting possibility hang in the air. "Before you can be whoever you choose to be," Cole finished. "I understand that better than most." She slipped the ring off slowly, held it out to him. But when he took it, she didn't let go immediately, their fingers touching over this small circle of gold that had witnessed so many kinds of love. "Keep it safe for me." Her voice wavered slightly. "Just keep it safe until I come back." Cole felt hope unfurl in his chest, warm as morning sun on winter frost. "How about we both keep things safe for each other? You guard our future, I'll guard our home." Lark, Rachel, smiled then, real and bright and full of promise. She reached for the partnership paperwork with her free hand, wrote one word in clear script at the bottom: "Soon." Outside, snow continued to fall on healing pastures, on streams running clear and true again. Inside, two people who'd found each other through necessary lies held onto a moment of perfect honesty, letting it light the way forward through whatever shadows lay ahead. The partnership agreement arrived by certified mail 6 months later, bearing Rachel Davies's clear signature at the bottom. Cole traced the letters with weathered fingers, remembering a different name written in the same careful hand. Spring sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching the envelope's Idaho postmark and the official court seal, marking the end of her testimony. "All partners share equal responsibility for business decisions and daily operations," the document stated, "including but not limited to land management, water rights administration, and future development of Maddox Ranch properties." His phone buzzed with a text. "Finished packing. On the road by noon. See you tomorrow?" Cole smiled at the question mark, so characteristic of the woman he'd known as Lark, always giving him space to choose, to decide. But some choices had been made long ago in moments of crisis and quiet truth. "Ranch will be ready," he typed back. "Drive safe." The last half-year had transformed both their lives. Rachel's testimony had helped convict 12 Meridian Holdings executives, including the men who'd ordered her father's death. The restitution money had allowed Cole to modernize the ranch's irrigation systems, repair fences, and rebuild his herd. But the biggest changes weren't visible on any balance sheet. They'd talked nearly every night about the trial, about the ranch, about their fears and hopes, and the complicated path that had brought them together. She'd kept him updated on every court proceeding. He'd sent her photos of recovering pastures and new calves. Somewhere along the way, their necessary lie had bloomed into something real, nurtured by distance and honesty and shared purpose. A truck pulled into the drive, Sheriff Mills right on time for their weekly coffee. These visits had become a tradition during Rachel's absence, a reminder that some friendships grow stronger after being tested. "Got the partnership papers, I see," Mills said, accepting a steaming mug. "Town's been buzzing about it all week. Quite a few betting pools on whether she'll actually come back." "People still talking?" Cole asked, though he knew the answer. "Small town. They'll always talk." Mills settled into his usual chair. "But differently now. More folks wondering if they might have been wrong about other things too. About age differences, and quick judgments, and what makes a marriage real." Cole thought of Sarah's ring, safely stored in his bedside drawer. Not hidden, not forgotten, but waiting for the right moment. "Real isn't always what it looks like from the outside." "No," Mills agreed softly. "Sometimes it's about who stands beside you when the whole world's against you, who fights for truth when lies would be easier." Through the window, they could see the ranch coming alive with spring. The pastures had recovered fully, green and lush, where manufactured drought had once burned them brown. The old windmill turned lazily in the morning breeze, pumping clean water from restored aquifers. "Rachel's different from Sarah," Cole said, testing the words. "Not better or worse, just different. But they'd have liked each other, I think. Both of them saw things other people missed. Both of them saw you," Mills added. "The real you. Not just what others assumed." He set his empty cup down. "Speaking of seeing things, Betty Henderson's planning a welcome home dinner. Says it's time the town did right by both of you." Cole smiled at the thought of Betty, who'd become one of their strongest supporters after the truth came out. "Rachel might need some time to adjust first. Being back here, being herself instead of Lark. Being your wife for real instead of pretend." Mills's eyes twinkled. "That what the empty ring box on your counter's about?" Heat crept up Cole's neck. "Thought I'd ask proper this time. Do things in the right order." "Sometimes the right order isn't what people expect." Mills stood, touching the partnership agreement gently. "Sometimes it's about finding your own way to the truth." After the sheriff left, Cole spent the morning preparing the ranch for Rachel's return. He moved her books, accumulated during her brief stay and shipped back gradually, onto the shelves he'd built beside Sarah's collection. The kitchen still held traces of both women, Sarah's favorite recipes boxed beside Rachel's legal volumes, past and present finding ways to coexist. The partnership agreement would make them legally equal in the ranch's operation, but Cole knew it represented something larger. This land had seen 4 generations of Maddox stewardship, had weathered drought and disaster and betrayal. Now it would witness something new, a partnership born from crisis, shaped by justice, and transformed by love that had grown real in its own unexpected way. His phone buzzed again. Made good time. Crossing into Wyoming now. Strange to think. Last time I did this, I was coming to save you. Cole thought of all the ways they'd saved each other, all the truths they'd discovered beneath necessary lies. He typed back, "This time you're coming home." The morning sun caught the partnership agreement's raised seal, making it glow like a promise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new chapters in their shared story. But today, Cole simply watched. Spring settled over his healing land and waited for the sound of familiar tires on the drive, bringing Rachel Davies home to the future they'd build together. The family photo sat in pride of place on the mantel. Cole and Rachel on their winter wedding day, snow falling soft around them on the ranch's front porch. Sarah's ring caught the tique light on Rachel's finger, while behind them the restored windmill turned against a sky full of promise. Betty Henderson had taken the picture 6 months after Rachel's return, capturing the moment they'd made official what had been true for so long. 1 year to the day after Weber's death, Cole stood at the kitchen window, watching his wife work. With a new foal in the spring sunshine, Rachel moved with the same precise grace she'd shown that day in the courtroom, the same quiet confidence that had helped her face down corporate giants and win justice for her father. "Stop hovering and come help," she called without looking up. "This little one's got your stubborn streak." Cole smiled, pulling on his boots. Some things hadn't changed. She still knew when he was watching, still read him like one of her legal briefs. But other things were different in all the best ways. The foal danced away from Rachel's gentle hands, all legs and attitude. They'd named her Phoenix, a private joke about rising from ashes. The mare was part of their rebuilding, one of many new beginnings taking root on the ranch. "Sheriff Mills called," Rachel said as Cole joined her in the paddock. "They're closing the last of the Meridian Holdings cases. Final sentencing today." Cole watched her face, seeing not triumph but quiet satisfaction. "You don't need to be there. Already sent my statement to the judge." She caught the foal's lead rope with practiced ease. "My father got his justice. Weber's sister got answers. The other families got their land back." Her eyes met his. "Time to focus on our future instead of their past." That future was visible all around them. The ranch had flourished under their partnership, combining Cole's generations of knowledge with Rachel's sharp business sense. They'd modernized thoughtfully, preserved what mattered, and found ways to help other small ranchers protect themselves from corporate predators. The town had changed too. Betty Henderson chaired the new Water Rights Oversight Committee. Jim Parker's dairy farm was running again, his children learning the business alongside him. Even Tucker, serving time but cooperating with investigators, had provided information that helped other communities fight similar land grabs. "Heard from Judge Harrison yesterday," Rachel continued, showing the foal how to give to pressure instead of fighting it. "He's retiring end of the month, wants me to consider running for his seat." Cole felt his heart swell with pride. Rachel Davies, daughter of a judge destroyed by corruption, rising to take the bench herself. "You'd be good at it, seeing through lies, fighting for truth. Been doing that since the day I met you. Since before that." She smiled, remembering, "Though I never expected my biggest case would start with pretending to be someone's wife." "Worked out all right in the end?" "Better than all right." She released the foal, watching it prance back to its mother. Then she turned to him, serious suddenly. "I've been thinking about names." Cole's hands stilled on the fence rail. "Names?" "For the ranch. When I become a judge, might be good to have something that represents both of us, both our stories." He studied her face in the spring light. This woman who'd crashed into his life with a desperate lie and stayed to build something true, who'd helped him honor Sarah's memory while creating space for new joy, who'd taught him that love could be both fierce and tender, both old and new. "What did you have in mind?" "Phoenix Ridge Ranch," she said softly, "because sometimes the most honest things rise from necessary lies." Cole felt the rightness of it settle in his chest. Behind them, the old windmill creaked gently, pumping clean water through restored aquifers. Above them, the Wyoming sky stretched endless and blue, promising fair weather and fresh possibilities. He pulled Rachel close, breathing in the scent of hay and horses and home. On the mantel inside, their wedding photo caught the morning light, while Sarah's recipe box shared shelf space with Rachel's law books. The past and present woven together, making something stronger than either alone. "Phoenix Ridge," he agreed. "New name, same heart." Rachel leaned into him, her head fitting perfectly against his shoulder. Around them, the ranch was coming alive, with morning sounds, horses nickering, cattle lowing, the distant rumble of Jim Parker's milk truck on the county road. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds, the music of a life they'd built together. The foal pranced past them again, Phoenix bright in the sunrise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, Rachel's judicial campaign, the ranch's expansion, the endless work of protecting what mattered. But today, they simply stood together in the morning light, watching their future unfold across the healing land. Some stories, Cole thought, don't end so much as transform. Like his ranch, like their love, like truth itself, always changing, always growing, always finding new ways to rise.